The following is an Operation Podcast production.
Our body are designed in such an intricate way where there's always reactions, and we signal, we turn things on, we turn things off, right? And our body is always adapting to a new environment. But nitric oxide, once it's produced, it signals, right? So it activates second messenger systems, and the second messengers are a little bit longer lasting. And then you got endocrine function where it binds to molecules. It's transported throughout the cardiovascular system. So I always say nitric oxide is like if you've got a string of dominoes, and that last domino is kind of like optimal life, optimal performance. And nitric oxide is that first domino, right? So to get to that end, all you have to do is tip over that first domino, and then everything else takes care of itself.
And we're going to learn how to do that in a really efficient way today.
Everyone, Dr. Nathan Bryan here, international leader in molecular medicine, nitric oxide biochemistry. This is Ever Forward Radio.
Guys, welcome back to Everforward Radio. I have, by popular demand, the other man, myth, and legend. Apparently, there are a few keys in the nitric oxide world. By popular demand, you all just raved about Dr. Nathan Bryan from my last few episodes covering nitric oxide. 2 with Dr. Lou Ignaro that are now well into the millions of views. And any other time I have a guest where we highlight nitric oxide, it just takes off. Yeah. And the more and more I learn about nitric oxide and I sit across from learned scholars such as yourself, it just continues to blow my mind as to how woven in this molecule, this gas is to really essential daily living, but more than that, just thriving, beating disease, performance, recovery, longevity, and so much more. With that, Dr. Nathan Bryan, welcome to the show.
No, that's great news. Thanks, Chase, for having me. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, my pleasure, my pleasure. And so out of the gate, I want to ask what might seem a typical standard question. I'm sure you get a lot, but just for maybe my audience members that are new, what is nitric oxide? Why is it so important for our health? And more specifically, why is it so important to you?
Yeah. Well, to answer the first question, it's a naturally produced molecule. It's a gas. It's a very simple molecule. It's one nitrogen, one oxygen. And when it's produced in the body, it's gone in less than a second. So it's what we call a signaling molecule. In fact, the Nobel Prize was awarded for the discovery of nitric oxide as a signaling molecule. But it does so many things in the human body. It regulates blood flow. It oxygenates the blood and cells. It turns on mitochondria. It mobilizes stem cells. And it's actually a foundational molecule in longevity and human performance.
Pretty great answer. We're going to dive into the weeds of a lot of that stuff, but I think my audience should really pick up on the fact of how short-lived nitric oxide is in our body. I think, if memory serves, it has a half-life of like half a second, something like that.
Yeah, so if you look inside the blood vessels, so intravascular half-life is about 2 milliseconds. So 1/5 of a second.
1/5 of a second.
If it's outside the blood supply, what we call extravascular, like any other cell, it's about 2 seconds, 2 to maybe 5 seconds.
So something that is so short-lived in the human body, yet is so instrumental in making sure the body stays alive and, like I said earlier, thriving, just continues to blow my mind. So it must be that powerful. Imagine if it lived any longer. Could we even survive nitric oxide living any longer than a couple milliseconds?
I mean, our body are designed in such an intricate way where there's always reactions, and we signal, we turn things on, we turn things off. Right, and our body is always adapting to a new environment. But nitric oxide, once it's produced, it signals, right? So it activates second messenger systems, and the second messengers are a little bit longer lasting. And then you got endocrine function where it binds to molecules. It's transported throughout the cardiovascular system. So I always say nitric oxide is like if you've got a string of dominoes, and that last domino is kind of like optimal life, optimal performance. And nitric oxide is that first domino. Right. So to get to that end, all you have to do is tip over that first domino, and then everything else takes care of itself. And we're going to learn how to do that in a really efficient way today. So with that, can you break down for us, please, how does nitric oxide work in the human body? Well, it works in most cells in the body. So I'll go back historically. The first pathway to be discovered, or the first role of nitric oxide, was as a vasodilator. Right, so that means it dilates the blood vessels. So when nitric oxide is produced by the endothelial cells, these are the cells that line all blood vessels throughout the body. That gas diffuses into that smooth muscle, relaxes the smooth muscle, and that leads to the blood vessel dilation. So that normalizes blood flow, It regulates things like sexual function. So if we want to have sex or be intimate, we've got to dilate the blood vessels of the sex organs, and that's done through nitric oxide.
For males and females?
Males and females. If we want to, have an engaging conversation, we've got to increase blood flow to the brain. So right now, we got to turn on the blood supply to our brain so you and I can have a deep conversation. We can recall memory. We can think. We can, perform cognitively at a high executive level.
So the same molecule responsible for sexual arousal is the one I'm relying on right now to be as present and cognitive as possible with you.
That's right. So it's the control and regulation of blood supply, right? We can't dilate all the blood vessels in the body or else we'd lose perfusion pressure. So we have to perfuse organs at different times. Right, like when we eat, we activate blood flow to the gastrointestinal tract to absorb nutrients. If we're in the gym and we're working out, we've got to increase blood flow to the skeletal muscles. So if we're running, we've got to increase blood flow to the coronary arteries. If we're thinking, we've got to increase blood flow to the brain to oxygenate, activate the mitochondria so you can make energy and the cells can do their job. If we're about to have sex, we've got to dilate the blood vessels of the sex organs so we can get an erection and perform sexually. So, but we don't all run around with an erection, and we don't, because
maybe some do. I don't know.
But it's the loss of regulation of blood flow, the inability to dilate blood vessels upon demand, which leads to cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, dementia, leads to kidney disease, liver disease, coronary disease. When we lose the ability to dilate and perfuse organs on demand, then those cells and tissues become dysfunctional.
It's, again, just wild. I mean, you're already hitting on so many bodily functions and things that we want to do, and also bodily functions that we don't want to have happen, like disease and breakdown of organs. And it's all coming back to this one teeny tiny little molecule.
That's just one action. We covered a lot, but that's just the vasodilatory actions of nitric oxide. But it's a neurotransmitter in the central nervous system. It's how nerves communicate with one another. But it's also critically important in our immune defense, in our immune system.
How so?
Well, when nitric oxide, we're exposed to a bacterium or virus or any pathogen, right? Our body recognizes that. So we mobilize an immune response. Let's just say we have a cut on our arm and we get a bacterial infection. And you know what happens after that? It turns red, it turns warm, and it swells up.
It's good inflammation.
That's good. So we're mobilizing an immune response. We're turning on our monocytes and neutrophils and macrophages, and those are generating a lot of nitric oxide. So nitric oxide binds to the iron sulfur centers of bacteria and shuts down their respiration. And if we've got a viral infection, so if we're exposed to, seasonal flu or coronavirus, which we all survived, then the body has to mobilize an immune response. And then when nitric oxide is produced, it prevents the virus from replicating. So we're exposed to viruses every day. Some people get sick, some people don't. I haven't been sick from a viral infection in more than 25 years. It's not that I live in a sterile environment. It's just I've never had COVID. I don't get the flu. It's just my body knows when it's attacked, mobilize an immune response, generate nitric oxide, and shuts down virus replication.
I'm sure you have some kind of maybe nitric oxide optimization protocol that is supporting that, which actually I want to get into a little bit later on. But before we do, I'm really curious, before we get into really understanding how to maximize and become more efficient with utilization and creation of nitric oxide, let's talk about symptoms of low nitric oxide. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What can maybe someone drop into their body that's listening, watching right now and go, oh, that's kind of me?
Well, we have to rely on symptoms, and we have to listen to our body because our body's always talking to us, right? And if we don't listen and don't respond and take action, then we get sick. But in terms of nitric oxide, the first sign and symptom, and we call this the canary in the coal mine, is sexual dysfunction.
Really?
Because if you can't make nitric oxide in the blood vessels that supply the sex organs, then it's not isolated to the pelvic region. You have that same dysfunction in your coronary arteries. You have the same dysfunction in your cerebral arteries. It just manifests first in the sex organs, because if you can't make nitric oxide, you can't dilate the blood vessels. If you can't dilate the blood vessels, you don't get engorgement. If you don't get engorgement, you don't get an erection. And it's the same in men and women. The anatomy is a little bit different, but the physiology is exactly the same.
Yeah, I feel like understanding that for a man is pretty obvious. Is it as obvious in terms of sensation and physical manipulation in a woman? So
for women to have an orgasm, that is triggered by an increase in intralabial and intraclitoral pressure. Right? So it's an increase in pressure that really manifests and climaxes as an orgasm. So where does that pressure come from? The pressure comes from an increase in volume. Increase in volume comes from dilation of the blood vessels to get engorgement. That dilation is dependent upon nitric oxide production. So even in the female, if you're not generating nitric oxide in the pelvic region, in the sex organs, you don't get clitoral engorgement, you don't get labral engorgement, you don't get an increase in pressure, and women become anorgasmic. And you don't get to the secretions, so women develop dryness, painful intercourse. So it's the same thing. For men, it's a blood flow problem. But for women, it's secretions, it's sensitivity, it's lubrication, and it's orgasms.
Wow. So the number one sign that we are deficient in nitric oxide is always going to be that sexual function?
It's usually manifest as sexual dysfunction. And then, because nitric oxide is the primary vasodilator, if we lose the ability to dilate blood vessels, then we get an elevation in blood pressure. Because you have a finite amount of blood pumping through your body right now. And if you can't make nitric oxide, you constrict the blood vessels. Now you get that same volume going through smaller pipes. Wow. And simple physics says pressure goes up.
Yeah.
So, 2 out of 3 Americans have an unsafe elevation in blood pressure. 50% of the men over the age of 40 self-report ED. I think the numbers are much higher because most 40-year-olds I know aren't going to self-report and admit ED. It's a prideful thing. So, we have an epidemic of nitric oxide deficiency. So it's sexual dysfunction, it's high blood pressure, then you start to develop metabolic disease. 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically unfit because my group was the first to publish, I think in 2010, that nitric oxide is part of the insulin signaling.
Really?
So insulin resistance is a symptom of nitric oxide deficiency.
I've never heard this before.
Yeah, and it was a very important paper in 2011. We published that in Journal of Free Radical Biology and Medicine.
So are you saying then that pre-diabetes and diabetes, type 1, type 2, all the above, is actually traced all the way back to a nitric oxide deficiency?
Type 2 specifically, because it's insulin resistance. So you're not, in type 1, your body's not making insulin.
Okay, yes. Yeah.
Type 2, insulin loses its ability to bring glucose into the cell. And so in this paper we published, we know that insulin binds to the insulin receptor in a cell. Primarily it's a muscle cell, a liver cell, or a fat cell. And then intracellularly, that turns on nitric oxide production. And then that activates GLUT4, which is an intracellular protein, to go to the membrane and bring glucose into the cell. But without nitric oxide production, GLUT4 doesn't get the signal, and you don't get glucose uptake. So it's insulin resistance. So you can develop hyperglycemia, hyperinsulinemia, and that's what we call type 2 diabetes.
Wow. I feel like I could go down a rabbit hole there of so many people when they hear pre-diabetes and getting a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, it all comes down to majority speaking for like movement, nutrition, exercise, your overconsumption.
Diabetes is completely preventable, curable, treatable. It's simply
right. Well, it makes me think, are we, not to say that maybe someone in the pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetes boat probably has room for modification in their diet and in physical activity, but maybe if we just focus first or maybe more on things to support nitric oxide production, getting it back up, there might not need to be as many changes.
That's exactly right. We have to understand at the molecular level what's going on in the disease processes. That's what I've done for the past 25 years, really piggybacking on the work that Lou Ignardo did early on. But so my whole premise was we have to understand the mechanism of disease to the extent that we can develop rational therapies. So I was singly focused on nitric oxide production. How does the human body make it? What goes wrong in people that can't make it? And then only when you can answer those two questions can you develop rational therapies. Because if you don't know how the body makes it and you don't know what goes wrong in people that can't make it, then who the hell are you to develop rational therapies? You can't do it.
Is there ever a situation where the human body, for whatever reason, becomes deficient in nitric oxide, it slows down, or can we even stop making nitric oxide? And if so, how do we ramp it back up?
The answer is yes. And the way to do that is to be American.
What do you mean?
It's the American lifestyle, the standard American diet, the SAD diet. It's a sedentary lifestyle. It's not sweating. It's exposure to fluoride, mouthwash,
Antacids I learned, which we're going to get into,
Yeah. No, most things that people are doing, Americans are doing, and to me it's no reason why Americans are some of the sickest people on the planet. It's like everything they're doing, their diet, their lifestyle, their oral hygienic practices, their medical practices, and drugs they're taking all lead to shutdown of nitric oxide production.
Wow. Wow.
And then what happens? You get high blood pressure, you get ED, you get inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune dysfunction.
And it's just a cascade of
that's
other.
Right. It's the domino effect.
It's a downfall right there. Yeah, it's the bad domino effect.
That's right.
That's the reverse domino.
You got to reverse it.
We kind of just maybe touched on it, but why do you think so many people, let's just keep it quantified in the United States, are deficient in nitric oxide today? Is it just because of what you just said?
I think it's primarily due to diet. We eat too much sugar, too many simple carbs. If we followed the experts and the government pyramid chart on how the government thinks that we should all eat, we get sick. I mean, it should be inverted.
Don't follow that chart.
No, don't follow that chart. I mean, it's an experiment gone horribly wrong. Right? No, but it's a high glycemic index food diet, because when you get an increase in blood sugar, glucose, right? Glucose is glue. Glucose, it's sticky. It sticks to everything, right? If you spill a soda water on the counter, you come back the next day, it's sticky, right?
Yeah.
It's sugar. And so that's what happens in your body. It sticks to protein. It sticks to hemoglobin. And that's hemoglobin A1C. It's the quantifiable amount of sugar stuck to hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is a protein that has to undergo changes, right? It goes to an allosteric structural change. When it goes from the arteries to the veins, it has to go change its conformation, deliver oxygen, pick up carbon dioxide. If glucose is stuck to it, it's glued together, you can't deliver oxygen, you can't pick up CO2, you become hypoxic, acidotic, you can't heal wounds, and that's why diabetics develop macular degeneration, poor wounds, neuropathy. Yeah, it's because you can't deliver oxygen.
Just a walking inflammation.
Yeah, and then it sticks to the nitric oxide synthase enzyme, and any enzyme has to undergo a conformational change to transfer electrons for a biochemical reaction. If it's glued together, it doesn't make nitric oxide.
God. Jeez, man, nitric oxide, it's everywhere.
It's just if you drink too much, if you consume too much sugar, you completely change the microbiome in the mouth and the gut. You need to develop dysbiosis, and it's a slippery slide from there on. Let's
get into talking about nitric oxide and performance recovery and longevity a little bit. At my core, Everford Radio really is a health and fitness show. I was a clinical health coach and wellness director for a concierge medical practice for several years, and my audience has grown with me a lot. But we definitely come back to what can we do to properly move as well and long as possible. Not saying everyone out there is just like the Olympic athlete, but we're trying to just feel good, look good for our own individual wellness goals. So let's talk individual performance and endurance and recovery. How does nitric oxide affect athletic performance and endurance specifically?
Well, I think it's an important subject because our health is our greatest asset, right? I mean, we've got to take care of our body if we're going to, live up to the expectations of what we're here to do on Earth. But there's an acute effect of nitric oxide on performance, and there's an adaptive effect. So, for instance, when you start to exercise, and let's say a well-trained athlete, an Olympic athlete, a professional athlete, when we start to exercise, it causes shear stress in the lining of the blood vessel. That tells the blood vessels, I need nitric oxide because I need more oxygen downstream. So that your body produces nitric oxide, you dilate the blood vessels, now you're going to get better oxygen nutrient delivery to the heart, to the skeletal muscles, whatever muscle group you're working. So that's number one. Number two, it improves the efficiency of mitochondrial ATP production. So it's directly affecting the efficiency of ATP production. So you're producing more energy with less oxygen.
Let me pause you real quick there. Nick, we good? Good? Okay. Yeah. More energy with less, so more efficiency, less energy.
More efficiency, more energy, more efficiently with less oxygen. So now what does that mean? If you push the anaerobic threshold back, you get less lactic acid buildup because you're more efficient, and so that means your recovery is going to be improved.
So is that saying when we get that classic DOMS, right, the delayed onset muscle soreness, and it's that, quote, lactic acid buildup, is that really because of a lack of sufficient nitric oxide, or did we just go too hard in the gym?
Well, you run out of oxygen, and then you start this anaerobic metabolism, and you get lactic acid as a byproduct, and that causes muscle soreness.
Okay.
So if you can improve the efficiency of oxygen delivery and the efficiency of oxygen conversion into ATP in the mitochondria, then you maintain this aerobic cycle and metabolism, and you get less lactic acid buildup.
Okay.
So that's the acute effects. Number two, the adaptive effects are if your body's continuously making sufficient nitric oxide, there's a signaling pathway that tells the cell to make more mitochondria. So nitric oxide induces mitochondrial biogenesis.
No way.
So now the net effect of that is now these cells have more mitochondria generating more energy more efficiently. So now you're a well-oiled machine.
I've heard so much over the last few years come up around mitochondrial revitalization and just, metabolic health, mitochondrial health has been, at least in my world, a big topic. And I, up until honestly sitting down with Dr. Ignaro last year, haven't heard anybody talk about as, hey, do this to help support healthy mitochondrial function, quantity, quality. Why aren't we talking more about nitric oxide and its direct impact on our mitochondrial health?
I don't know. We've appreciated this in the scientific and medical literature for the past 20 years. I mean, I think these were discovered in the 90s. So this isn't new information in terms of nitric oxide induced mitochondrial biogenesis and improving mitochondrial function. But there's a lot. I mean, for me, it's every age-related chronic disease has lower numbers of mitochondria per cell, and the mitochondria aren't functioning. So if nitric oxide can create more mitochondria that are working more efficiently, then that leads to the root cause of most age-related chronic disease.
Jeez. Does nitric oxide improve cardiovascular health and longevity directly?
Absolutely. And mechanistically, we can explain this. So number one, with cardiovascular disease, is a broad category of symptoms. It's hypertension, it's obstructive coronary disease, ischemic heart disease, it's Alzheimer's, it's cardiovascular disease. So what that means is that the blood vessels are no longer reactive. So which means you can no longer dilate the blood vessels, or there's what's called obstructive coronary disease or obstructive cardiovascular disease, where you start to get plaque deposition in the lining of the blood vessel. There's like a physical obstruction in the lumen of the blood vessel. So you've got less blood flow getting to that organ. So what nitric oxide does, when you lose the ability to produce nitric oxide, we call that the functional loss of nitric oxide in the endothelium, then that's what sets the stage for the onset and progression of cardiovascular disease. So it's doing this through dilating blood vessels. If you can't make nitric oxide, you don't dilate blood vessels. Nitric oxide suppresses the expression of adhesion molecules. So when you lose nitric oxide, you start expressing these adhesion molecules. Now your blood vessels are like Velcro. All the immune cells stick, fats stick and everything. Then you lose the barrier function of the endothelial cells. You start to get smooth muscle hyperplasia. You get foam cells, atherosclerosis. And then at the end of the day, the plaque ruptures, and that's heart attack and stroke. So everything we know about the onset and progression of cardiovascular disease can be traced back to the functional loss of nitric oxide. And it's affecting platelet function and blood clotting and everything we know about heart disease, heart attack, stroke, cardiovascular disease.
Forgive me if you already touched on this, but can we trace it back even further? Like, what is the origin of nitric oxide? Is it a chemical reaction, chemical byproduct? Does it need other molecules in place and functioning properly in order for it to exist? Like, how does nitric oxide even come into the play?
Well, it's a molecule that's produced. It's produced by several pathways. So there's an enzyme found in our endothelial cells, and there's the same isoform that's found in our neurons. There's a different isoform found in our immune cells. But this enzyme, its job is to make nitric oxide, and it's a very complex, complicated reaction. It's what we call in biochemistry, it's a 5-electron oxidation, multi-step oxidation reaction. So you have to be able to count electrons and figure out where you got to have electron donors. You got to
That's
have
above my pay grade for sure, but it's important to know. Thank you.
This enzyme takes L-Arginine, and your listeners are probably familiar with L-Arginine, and through that 5-electron oxidation, arginine is converted to nitric oxide gas. And then the byproduct of that reaction is L-Citrulline. So citrulline is a byproduct of nitric oxide production. It's not a precursor.
These terms are probably pretty familiar for a lot of my audience members, myself included. These are two very common ingredients in most pre-workouts. And amino acids, BCAAs, things like that. Yeah, interesting.
But our body is never deficient in these amino acids, so it makes no sense to supplement with them.
So it makes no sense to supplement with L-Citrulline.
With arginine or L-Citrulline.
Really? There's no, we're already at a max threshold? Like by taking any more, we're not getting any extra benefit?
No, in fact, by taking more, you could actually do more harm.
What?
Yeah.
My workout this morning, I take a stimulant-free, pre-workout, caffeine-free, has arginine and L-Citrulline. in it. So are you telling me I'm thinking I'm getting a better workout, but I might be causing mitochondrial damage?
There's a couple of things. You're a young, healthy guy.
Thanks.
The clinical data tell us that if you take a patient, and these were done in post-infarct patients, so people who just suffered a heart attack, and these studies were published in the 1990s, but they wanted to, and the intent of the study was good, right? You want to increase nitric oxide production in people who just had a heart attack to see if you could improve recovery of the heart, right? And so they give them high-dose L-Arginine. And this was in a double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial. They gave a placebo, and they gave L-Arginine. And they stopped the clinical trial halfway through because the patients who were getting the L-Arginine suffered higher death, higher morbidity, higher mortality. So
why am I not dying by taking this in a pre-workout then?
Well, because you have good endothelial function. So mechanistically, we know that if you push arginine through a patient that has an uncoupled NOS enzyme, that enzyme produces superoxide, which is an oxygen radical, instead of making nitric oxide.
Wow.
So you're exacerbating the condition you're trying to fix. And then several years later, the same thing happened in patients with peripheral heart disease. High-dose arginine, the patients got worse.
Wow.
They don't get better.
I can understand from more kind of that acute clinical model, but I just want to bring it back to, myself and kind of, my typical listener, audience member here, because I think most people are still taking pre-workouts that have this ingredient in it. And I just want to kind of like revisit this again with you. Are we doing damage, or is it just more unnecessary?
I think it's, in young, healthy people, I think it's just unnecessary because we're never deficient in arginine.
Okay.
The binding constant, the amount of arginine you need to bind to theoretically saturate the enzyme nitric oxide synthase is only 5 micromolar. We already that's nothing. Yeah. There's 100 to 200 micromolar inside the cell. So you already have 20 to 40 times more than what's necessary. The problem is, you can run into problems if you take too much arginine. You increase the expression of an enzyme called arginase 2. And arginase diverts arginine away from nitric oxide and through ornithine and urea disposal. So theoretically and biochemically, you could divert arginine away from nitric oxide and toward urea because it's the body's response to too much nitrogen. If you take too much nitrogen, you get into problems, and your body has to dispose of it through urea in the urine.
And I want to actually, while I have you here, I'm like live fact checking something. I want to look at this like ingredient profile of a very common pre-workout to see exactly the levels to get your feedback on it. Oh, excuse me. It's L-Citrulline. I'm not seeing actually any arginine, but I do know it is a fairly common ingredient. It can be found in a lot of products like a pre-workout. How do you feel about L-Citrulline being in there?
Again, all these these are semi-essential amino acids, right? We get it from the breakdown of proteins, whether you eat animal protein or plant protein. These are common constituent amino acids of proteins. The other thing is that every cell in the body has what's called the partial urea cycle. And so this partial urea cycle is continuously producing arginine and citrulline. And because citrulline is a byproduct of nitric oxide production, anytime you give a byproduct of a biochemical reaction, sometimes there's feedback inhibition. So it can shut down nitric oxide production. But citrulline is so far away from nitric oxide.
Okay.
Right? Citrulline has to go through an enzyme called arginosuccinate synthase. Then has to go through an enzyme called arginosuccinate lyase to make arginine. Then arginine's got to go through nitric oxide synthase to make nitric oxide and citrulline. So you're so far away from nitric oxide. Again, probably it's not going to cause any harm. It's just unnecessary. And these companies who do this just don't understand the enzymology and the biochemistry.
I doubt it. Some maybe, but I doubt it. What about, excuse me, kind of staying on track with the supplements and lifestyle here, looking at beetroot powder. I know that's becoming, I think, more common for a replacement for a pre-workout because of its supposed nitric oxide inducing benefits.
Supposed is probably a good word.
Ooh, really?
Look, beets, there was some pretty good data coming out of the UK in 2010, 2011. So by the time the 2012 Olympic Games came around in London, you found that most of these Olympic athletes were drinking liters and liters of beetroot juice and causing a lot of gastric discomfort. But they were getting some benefits out of it. And the published data showed that if you took beet juice with a standardized amount of inorganic nitrate, then if you had the right oral bacteria and you had sufficient stomach acid production and this circuit was in place, then you could produce nitric oxide, and it could talk about all the performance-enhancing effects that we talked about earlier. So then the market was flooded with beetroot products, right? Beetroot juice, beetroot powders. And so I began to test these products because clearly the mechanism of action of the performance-enhancing effects of beetroot was due to the nitrate content, and then the person had to have the right oral bacteria, and the person couldn't take antacids, or else you completely bypass this effect.
So it has to be this perfect storm of the person taking it.
So number one, I tested almost all the products, and probably 95% of the products out there, there was no detectable nitrate or nitrite in the beetroot products. So they were dead beets. They're dead beet products. So in fact, and we were doing clinical trials at the time, and we used these commercial beet products as placebos in our clinical trials.
No way.
Because they're perfect placebo. They're beets, but they don't produce nitric oxide.
What? Wow.
So the market is now flooded with these products, and really the only thing they do is turn your pee and your poop pink and cause a lot of anxiety.
Pretty wild colors.
That's right.
So, again, to kind of cap up this, recovery performance section, what can we really do that is, one, safe, and two, going to actually move the needle to get the results we want, meaning increase or stimulate or maximize nitric oxide production or even just nitric oxide efficiency?
Well, I tell people it's the science is complex, but sometimes the solution is pretty simple. So I say you only have to do two things to enhance nitric oxide production. Number one, you got to stop doing the things that inhibit it. And number two, you got to start doing the things that promote it. So what is that? The first thing you got to do is stop doing the things that we know shut down nitric oxide production.
Like what?
Antiseptic mouthwash, anything that's going to destroy the microbiome, fluoride in your water supply, fluoride in your toothpaste. These are antiseptics that kill all bacteria. Antacids, we talked about antacids, that are the proton pump inhibitors, completely shut down.
We're going to get into that a little bit deeper here. Hold on, everybody.
And then it's a high sugar, high carbohydrate diet. Again, it causes, the shuts down nitric oxide production, causes a lot of oxidative stress. So if you get rid of fluoride, if you get rid of mouthwash, if you stop using antacids and you eliminate simple carbohydrates and sugar, anything that leads to an increase in blood sugar, now you've released the brakes on the body to produce nitric oxide. And then to activate it and stimulate it, you can moderate physical exercise.
Define moderate for us. What do you mean by that?
We used to say 20 to 30 minutes of moderate physical exercise was sufficient. Get your heart rate up, get your breath rate up. Now we know that just 4 to 5 minutes of high intensity interval training.
Wow, really?
Is enough to stimulate nitric oxide production.
Daily or a couple of days a week, or what's that sweet spot there?
I mean, I think it's important that we have to do this daily. I mean, probably each time you do it, you're going to get a cumulative effect.
So that's more ideal scenario.
More ideal scenario. Number two is nasal breathing. So there's a high concentration of this enzyme in the upper airway sinuses.
Yeah, please go there more for us. This is actually another question I had around what's the science behind nitric oxide nasal breathing techniques, and why is nasal breathing so important for nitric oxide efficiency and production?
Well, that same enzyme that's in our endothelial cells is also in our epithelial cells. So the endothelial cells are inside the body, right? Endo. The epithelial cells are outside the body, in our gut and our sinuses. But this enzyme is found there. So when we do nasal breathing, there's mechanoreceptors on these epithelial cells. And when they're activated, they go, I need nitric oxide. You got to make nitric oxide. So now when you're making nitric oxide, you're doing nasal breathing, you're delivering that NO into the lower airways. And it's not just a vasodilator, it's a bronchodilator. So now you're dilating the bronchioles and you're getting better oxygen exchange. You're supersaturating the red cell and you're lowering blood pressure. And there's clinical data showing nasal breathing, deep breathing, meditation can lower blood pressure. And it's a nitric oxide related phenomenon. But, here's the big but, that enzyme has to be functional. So if you have all these risk factors, if you have ED, if you have high blood pressure, if you eat a high sugar diet, you can nasal breathe till the cows come home, but you're not producing any nitric oxide.
You're not even, like, let's say someone has ED, has cardiovascular disease, and they're going to start with one thing today, and it's nasal breathing. Is there ever a point where it's going to help them, or is the damage already done?
No, you can reverse the dysfunction of that enzyme, so we can recouple it and maintain its normal function. So now we can do this through a gas phase analyzer that I have. I've used it in the research lab, and I have one at home. But you can measure the nitric oxide coming out of the nasal sinuses either when you're humming or when you're doing nasal breathing.
Talk to us about humming. This was something that I did a clip with Dr. Ignaro on this, and it took off, like millions of views. People were just floored as to how humming actually has any kind of net positive health effect. Yeah. Why humming? What does it do? What's going on there?
Well, there's certain frequency. When we think about biochemistry, everything is transfer of electrons. In humming, there's certain frequencies of sound that'll activate this and either release nitric oxide from certain carrier molecules or stimulate nitric oxide production.
So do we have to hum in tune?
Well, the challenge is it's different for everybody because the resonance frequency is dependent upon the volume of the sinuses and the oral cavity. But you just got to figure it out and figure out what's comfortable. But this resonance frequency is what stimulates nitric oxide production.
So how do we know if we want to start nasal humming right now? How do we know it's in the right tune, the right resonance? You said feeling.
There's a certain frequency, and I can't recall the literature now. But it's searchable. I just don't recall what it is.
Do you feel confident that most people just their standard, whatever just hum comes out of their nose? Like, are we close, or is this just a waste of time?
No, I think it's probably close. I think whatever occurs naturally is typically by reason. But again, we got to focus on recoupling that enzyme and making it functional. So when we start to hum and we start to do nasal breathing, we're actually producing nitric oxide and get the benefits of it, where we can oxygenate tissue, we can mobilize stem cells and lower blood pressure.
Okay. Makes me think about nasal breathing. It's become very popular for sleep
mouth
health.
taping. Yeah.
Mouth taping. Yeah. I've been mouth taping for a couple of years now. And walk us through the benefits. Is there any of mouth taping to stimulate nasal breathing while we sleep to help nitric oxide production?
I think there's benefits to mouth breathing, provided you've seen an airway physician to make sure that you've got an open airway. Because if you've got obstructive airway disease and you tape your mouth, I mean, you could become severely anoxic and certainly hypoxic.
Are you talking more of we have true sleep apnea?
Yeah, so it'd be it's an anatomical obstruction. Either the jaw's pushed back and it's obstructing the airway, so that sometimes you may have to do some manipulation or some appliances. But in a person that has a normal airway and they're just mouth breathers, you tape the mouth closed. Because here's what happens. The mouth breathers at night are not only bypassing this normal nitric oxide production, they're inhibiting the nitric oxide production by the oral bacteria. Because you're fully oxygenating and changing the ecology of the bacteria, and it's leading to a low pH in the saliva. It leads to tooth decay, and it completely changes the microbiome and completely shuts down nitric oxide production. So close your mouth, tape your mouth, and you're going to change the ecology and the microbiome. But I think just as importantly, now you're going to start to activate nitric oxide production. And people with sleep apnea, they don't oxygenate at night, right? And so in order for that enzyme to make nitric oxide, it requires oxygen. So when we sleep, that's our time to repair, right? And nitric oxide is the signal that tells our own stem cells to mobilize and differentiate. So at night when we sleep, we're mobilizing stem cells, we're repairing dysfunctional cells, and we're repairing the body. We're regenerative by nature. But if you're hypoxic because you have sleep apnea, you don't have enough oxygen to make nitric oxide. So you develop hypoxia. You don't mobilize stem cells. You wake up tired. Your mitochondria become dysfunctional, and you feel awful the next day.
And this could be or could not be really, the needle could be moved or not by mouth taping?
The needle can be moved. Number one, it's going to change the ecology of the microbiome. And once we concentrate on focusing, recoupling the function of the NOS enzyme, now you're going to get nitric oxide production. You're not going to develop hypoxia. You're going to oxygenate at night. You're going to mobilize stem cells, and you're going to wake up feeling much better. Okay,
I've heard you mention a couple of things that seem to be the crucial kind of steps, process, pathways, if you will, of nitric oxide production, where we can stimulate it and where we're maybe prohibiting it. And besides the nose, you brought up the mouth biome a few times. Why is the mouth so important to nitric oxide production, or squashing it?
Back in the probably 70s or 80s, the late 70s, it was discovered that our salivary glands concentrate inorganic nitrate from the diet. So nitrate is this molecule that's found in green leafy vegetables, beets, for example. And then in the 70s, these cancer biologists thought nitrate would form nitrosamines, which would then intercalate DNA, cause mutations, and cause cancer. Right? It's the whole cured meat, bacon, hot dog cancer hypothesis.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's why you see no nitrates, no nitrites. Is that all because of this?
That's right. That's deceptive marketing, by the way.
Wow.
But we'll get into that. So in the 70s, it was realized that the body, number one, the kidneys reabsorb nitrate and then concentrate it in our salivary glands. So the question was, why is the body intentionally concentrating nitrate in our salivary glands? And then in the 90s, it was recognized that there are nitrate-reducing bacteria that take that nitrate. They're facultative anaerobes, so if you don't have oxygen, they respire on nitrogen. And now they're converting that nitrate into nitrite. Now our saliva is enriched in nitrite. We swallow our saliva, and the intention is to produce stomach acid. So now that nitrite becomes nitric oxide in the lumen of the stomach. Wow. So now the health benefits of a diet, a plant-based diet, are you eat these nitrate-rich foods, the bacteria convert it into a usable form because humans don't have a nitrate reductase gene. And now if we make stomach acid, we get a burst of nitric oxide in the lumen of the stomach. And that's like a reservoir of nitric oxide. And it can dilate blood vessels. It kills H. pylori. It kills E. coli. It kills salmonella. It kills botulism. Anything, any foodborne pathogen, it kills.
Okay, so that poses the question right there for me of, are vegetarians and vegans, are they naturally more rich with nitric oxide because they hypothetically are consuming more of these vegetables, deep leafy green vegetables?
Well, it depends. Depends upon their oral microbiome and if they're taking stomach antacids.
Okay.
But here's what we know from the work of Caldwell Esselstyn, Joel Kahn, a lot of these vegetarian, vegan cardiologists. The data are very clear. If you've got a patient with advanced coronary artery disease and obstructive coronary disease, you put them on a plant-based diet, you can see plaque regression. It happened with Bill Clinton. It's happened to a lot of high-profile people. But in having conversations with Dr. Esselstyn, he goes, some people respond, some people don't. And I go, well, here's the question you have to ask. How many of those people you switch to a plant-based diet use fluoride toothpaste? How many of those people are using mouthwash? How many of those people are on antacids? And he goes, oh, shit. He goes, that's it then.
Wow.
So now if you're going to eat a plant-based diet, you got to make sure you have the right microbiome. You can't have fluoride. You can't use antiseptic mouthwash. And you damn sure can't take antacids, or else the diet won't work for you.
Okay, take us to the antacid point. I heard you talk about this on a few other episodes, a few other shows, and the whole proton pump inhibitor thing just blows my mind as, well, one, how people are just popping them for months and years when that was never supposed to be the case. So there's a whole other issue there of just why are we taking medication for so long when it was never approved or proven safe? But on top of that, we're solving one problem, supposedly, but really causing potential detrimental damage to nitric oxide production.
Yeah, so these drugs, there are different classes of antacids, right? There's the H2 blockers, they're the buffers, the sodium bicarb, then there's the dangerous ones called proton pump inhibitors. And these are, the original prescription drugs were the omeprazole and the pantoprazole. Those are prescription forms of this.
I used to be on those. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and look, so the clinical trials, when you do a clinical trial through the FDA, you go through kind of a protocol and you look for a specific endpoint, a dosing regimen, and the purpose was to treat acute gastroesophageal reflux disease, right?
Really bad heartburn.
Really bad heartburn.
For the layman, yeah, right? Yeah.
And so these drugs were used for 3 to 5 days and never after that, right? Acute esophageal reflux disease. But then at some point, some regulatory or probably some lobbyist had this idea, well, let's make these over the counter where you don't even need a prescription for them. Now you can go get your Prilosec, Prevacid, your Nexiums, and people take these every day. And some people have been taking them for 15, 20, 30 years. And now if you look at the outcome data, that people who have been on PPIs for 3 to 5 years, there's 3 independent reports, 40% higher incidence of Alzheimer's, 35% higher incidence of heart attacks and strokes.
Come on.
It's not increased risk, it's increased incidence. It's actual incidence.
Just for taking heartburn medication?
Just taking the PPIs.
Come on.
So
That's
now
horrible.
when you take that clinical observation, and then what we try to do is take that observation, let's work backwards, figure out, okay, what's causing this? Because it's indisputable. Highly significant p-value of 0.001. So mechanistically, what's causing Alzheimer's, heart attack, and stroke? And a group out of Houston determined that these drugs are completely inhibiting nitric oxide production from the enzyme in the lining of the blood vessel and from the nitric oxide that's being produced from the diet, from swallowing our own saliva. So you want to know what happens when you inhibit nitric oxide production? You get heart attack, you get stroke, you get Alzheimer's. So these, and I've argued this for the past 10 years because this data is more than 10 years old. The drug companies and the regulators have to take these drugs off the market. These are worse than the COX-2 inhibitors back in 25 years ago.
I will
the
gladly
Vioxx, the Celebrex, those were
that's
causing heart
miserable.
attack and stroke, and they took them off the market.
I
That
hope
was a
people-
responsible thing to
I
do.
hope people would choose to live with heartburn than not live at all.
No, that's right. These are deadly drugs. They're dangerous, and they should not be over the counter. And I tell people all the time, you got to wean off of these. No matter how bad the heartburn is, you got to slowly wean off of these drugs, titrate off of them, or else you're going to get a heart attack, stroke, or Alzheimer's, and you're going to die from it.
Is there anything you can walk us through to further support oral microbiome health beyond not using antiseptic mouthwash, not using fluoride? Are there any particular foods or liquids or, I think the nasal breathing technique can definitely support that like we talked about, but what else can we do to support a healthy oral microbiome, therefore supporting healthy nitric oxide function?
Well, it's dependent upon diet, the foods you eat. So the bacteria that we've investigated and cultured and published on, these are facultative anaerobes. So they live on the dorsal part of the tongue, near the gag reflex, in the deep in the crypts of the tongue. So if there's oxygen around, they can respire on oxygen. If there's no oxygen, they reduce nitrate into nitrite, and they use that as their energy source. So yeah, more green leafy vegetables. So nitrate can act as a prebiotic. You got to close your mouth. You can't be, because that changes the pH. You got to have an optimal salivary pH. And then just eliminate things that destroy the microbiome. Antibiotics, antiseptic mouthwash, fluoride, those are the big ones. And sugar.
Okay.
Sugar completely changes the ecology of the microbiome.
Well, I'm very happy to share with you, before we sat down, my lunch was a large sweet green salad full of deep green leafy vegetables.
Well, hopefully you didn't use fluoride toothpaste or mouthwash this morning.
Nope. I haven't used that for years. I swap out the spring mix salad and my guacamole greens for kale. So, what besides kale, maybe what are maybe actual, if you're familiar, other dark, deep green leafy vegetables that we can hone in on?
Typically, the darker the green, the more nitrogen in it.
And so just any green vegetable.
Any green vegetable. But, in 2015, we published this paper that's got a lot of attention because we wanted to make recommendations. Like if you wanted to enhance your nitric oxide production, the question was, how many stalks of celery or how many grams of spinach or lettuce or kale would you need to eat in a single serving to fuel and prime this nitric oxide pathway? So that's a very important question. So we went to Dallas, here in Los Angeles, Raleigh, North Carolina, New York, and Chicago. Kind of 5 cities around all U.S. And then we brought those back to my lab. We analyzed them, we extracted the nitrate, and we analyzed it, and we reported it. What we found was that the nitrate in vegetables grown in Dallas and Los Angeles were 30, 40, 50 times different than what was grown in Chicago or New York.
Why?
Well, it's the soil conditions, it's the growing season, it's whether you add nitrogen-based fertilizers to the soil or not, it's the time of harvest, it's the amount of lightning storms that happen in that area, because lightning fixes nitrogen in the air. The air we breathe is 78% nitrogen.
God, the level to which everything is connected to
lightning
nitric
fixes
oxide.
that nitrogen and puts it in the
Mother
soil.
Nature could be why you have low nitric oxide. You live in a high lightning environment? No, move.
That's right.
Oh my God. Jeez. Well, I mean, this is a whole nother conversation
that's a
as
whole
well
field of agronomy.
just like the dip in agriculture and the poor soil levels and just being depleted and not being turned over properly. So I mean, this is just it.
So there's no way we can predict or make recommendations on which vegetable, because even from celery to lettuce to spinach, I mean, there's as much as a 30 or 40 fold difference. And even that same vegetable from celery in Dallas to New York, it's a 80 fold difference.
It makes me think just like, and not to get bogged down in the details, but just whatever diet you abide by, right? Let's say you're traveling and you go to Dallas, you go to LA, you go to Chicago, you go to Raleigh, North Carolina, and you might be staying true to the same diet. Maybe you eat the same foods or same quantity or types of food. Maybe 90% of your diet, like myself, is pretty regimented, pretty much the same. But depending on where you are, you could actually really be way far off from maximizing these goals, especially when it comes to nitric oxide.
Well, I just spent 10 days in Italy, and I can tell you the food that I ate there made me feel incredibly better and different than eating the same foods here in the U.S.
Isn't that the
it's
best?
Incredible.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to
it's a
convince my wife
it's a
to
real
move
difference.
all the time to go over there. It just, I mean, we love pasta and stuff and Italian food anyway, but just like, it's just like, why is that, you know? And now we know why. Like you go over there, you eat pasta all day, every day. And over here, it's kind of demonized, like no carbs, no pasta, none of this stuff. But it's like, I can eat my body weight in pasta over there and I feel better than I do over here. It's crazy. So we've been talking a lot about different ways to really influence nitric oxide production and maximize quality and efficiency. Are there any risks to boosting nitric oxide through these practices?
Yeah, there's risk in everything. I mean, what we know about the toxicology of nitric oxide, there's only two things we worry about. The toxicity of nitric oxide is defined by an unsafe drop in blood pressure and a condition called methemoglobinemia. So you'll see an unsafe drop in blood pressure long before you start to see any methemoglobin formation. So methemoglobin is when you take too much nitric oxide, it oxidizes the iron of hemoglobin and changes it to an iron 3, or what we call methemoglobin. And so people become cyanotic. Their blood looks like it's really chocolatey. So it loses the oxygen carrying capacity of the red blood cell. But that you don't see that. And so if you take too much nitric oxide or you administer too much nitric oxide, it could lead to systemic vasodilation. You could lose perfusion pressure, unsafe drop in blood pressure, you get syncope and maybe pass out.
Would this be something someone would be able to tell pretty quickly that this is happening? I'm just thinking, they're listening, I'm eating all the dark, deep green leafy vegetables possible.
You cannot overdose on food.
Okay, I'm like, am I going to get too nitric oxide-y?
No, because I think there's an inherent inefficiency, and I think it's by design. So the amount of nitrate that we consume in the diet, under absolute best scenario, you're only going to metabolize about 5% of that.
Wow.
So the kidneys reabsorb about 25% of it, and it's concentrated in our salivary glands. And then the bacteria that live in the mouth are only going to convert about 20% of what's in the saliva. So 20% of 25 is 5%.
Wow.
And that's under the absolute best optimal conditions.
Can you take us back to that point you made about the creative marketing around nitrates and nitrites and like certain foods and deli meats and even wines and things like that? And why does that matter as it relates to nitric oxide
back
conversation?
Probably this started in the 50s. We'll go back, and because I always try to, why are we doing things? Why are things done today? And they have to have a reason. So I have to go back historically and go, what started this whole field? And in the 1950s, there was a paper showing that nitrite cured salmon or fish, they could detect low molecular weight nitrosamines in nitrite cured meat. So then low molecular weight nitrosamines are known carcinogens, mainly liver carcinogens.
There it is, okay.
So it's thought, okay, nitrite added to meat forms nitrosamines. Nitrosamines cause cancer. So if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C.
Yeah.
And so the nutritional epidemiologists started down this road, and they started doing studies of people who eat a disproportionate amount of cured meat, right? Hot dogs, bacon, sausages. And they found that they have a slightly higher increased risk of gastrointestinal disease, mainly stomach cancer. So then they thought, okay, well, it's the cured and processed meats that have nitrite and nitrate that form nitrosamines that are causing the cancer.
And probably taking antacids too.
There's so many confounding factors. In nutritional epidemiology, if you don't have a relative risk of greater than 2, it's probably noise. So it's not a real effect. But then if that were the case, and I started publishing on this in the early 2000s, if this were the case, if nitrite and nitrate cause cancer, then vegetarians would have a 10-time higher rate of cancers than meat eaters. Because 85% of the burden from nitrate comes from green leafy vegetables.
And that's not happening.
That's not, it's protective. And in fact, in 2009, I published a paper showing that nitrite in cancer, in animal models of cancer, prevented the cancer, prevented metastatic disease, and protected many certain types of cancer.
So this whole nitrite free is just clever marketing. It has no actual immediate impact on our health.
No, in fact, I think meat companies should be advertising this. Because think about what they do. They're saying no nitrite added. But what they're doing, you can't, by definition, you can't have a cured meat product without nitrite. So what they do is that they're not adding potassium nitrite or sodium nitrite salt. They're adding cultured celery extract. So celery salt, which is high in nitrate, and then they put a starter culture of bacteria in there, usually Staph aureus, or Staph carnosus, and that reduces the nitrate to the nitrite. So the nitrite is still curing the meat, but because they're adding cultured celery salt, they can put that on the label. It's still nitrite at the end of the day.
Okay, all right. So then we have celery salt in our pantry as like a seasoning. Is this something we should consider not using anymore? Or
You have to have bacteria on that surface of that for that celery salt to, nitrate is the curing agent. Nitrite is the curing agent.
okay,
And so in our 2010 paper, we published that nitrite cured bacon has about 3 to 4 times higher levels of nitrite than the nitrite cured. The no nitrite added bacon has 3 to 4 times higher nitrite, residual nitrite, than nitrite cured bacon.
how are companies getting away with this?
It's pushed by consumer demand. The consumers are so misinformed that they're demanding this from the meat suppliers. I went and I consulted for Kraft Oscar Mayer, and I go, you guys should be advertising. This is nitrite added meat, and this is a health benefit. This is an indispensable nutrient. And they go, well, the consumers won't buy it, so they got to put no nitrite on it. I said, well, it's actually deceptive marketing. You should be advertising this.
That is a whole nother mess. Oh my goodness. Jeez. Well, while we're kind of talking about, consumer awareness, we can't have more consumer awareness without proper research happening first. So this is the world that you live in. What are the latest breakthroughs, if any, in nitric oxide research today here, 2025?
I've been doing this for more than 25 years now. And really, the folks like Louis Ignarro and Fred Murad and Bob Furchgott started this whole field with the Nobel Prize and their discoveries that, 10, 20 years before the Nobel Prize was awarded. So these guys discovered that nitric oxide is produced in the human body and it signals. And then the next frontier was, how do we safely and effectively deliver nitric oxide in product technology and drug therapy? And that's really been my focus for the past 20 years because I've solved the riddle of how to deliver nitric oxide gas. Right, we've made the solid dose form of nitric oxide gas. We can deliver it in an outpatient setting through an orally disintegrating tablet. We've had these products on the market for a number of years, but really what I'm focused on now is developing drug therapies around nitric oxide because, I think that will be the cure for cardiovascular disease. It'll be the cure for Alzheimer's. We're developing a topical drug for diabetic ulcers and non-healing wounds.
Wow,
Nitric oxide completely heals wounds. Diabetic ulcers, non-healing wounds. It kills the infection inside the wound, creates blood flow to an ischemic wound bed, and the wound heals.
By, taking this kind of drug therapy, by like an oral form of it?
We have OTC products. We have so-called dietary supplements on the market now that produce nitric oxide gas. So our whole my thought process when I started making these discoveries and filing patents was, if you have ED and you have high blood pressure and you have diabetes, I can't give you arginine or beet because you have dysbiosis. Your body can't make nitric oxide from it. That's your problem. So all these products that have been on the market giving you amino acids, precursors, substrates, beets, they may work in a young, healthy individual, but people who are sick, who need nitric oxide, that's not a nitric oxide source for them. So I had to think a little bit differently. Best example is hormone replacement therapy. And nitric oxide is a hormone. We published on that in 2007. Nitric oxide is a hormone. Is a hormone. I was the first person to demonstrate that nitric oxide is a hormone. It was a 2007 paper.
I can't handle any more mind-blowing facts today.
It's very simple now. If you're low in testosterone, we give you testosterone, right? If women are low in estrogen, we give you estrogen. We don't give you DHEA or pregnenolone and hope your body can make these hormones out of it. We give it to you. Same thing with nitric oxide. If you can't make nitric oxide, then I got to give it to you. So how do you deliver this fleeting gas? And so I had to develop a solid dose form of nitric oxide gas. And this is a lozenge you put in your mouth that dissolves over 5 to 6 minutes, and we release therapeutic amounts of nitric oxide.
Okay, all right. So this is fascinating. Is there only a net positive benefit for someone taking that if they have these other chronic illnesses and diseases and are truly deficient versus someone like, I kind of go like, the optimization biohacker route here of, if there's a way that I can just ingest it and get a little bit more, can I? Is that safe? Is that even realistic?
No, I say there's only 2 people in the world who need nitric oxide. There's the people who are sick and want to get well. There's the people like us who are well and don't want to get sick and want to optimize and want to function every day to the best of our ability.
You would think everyone would fall into one of those categories, no? We either are sick or don't want to get sick.
That's right.
Hopefully that's you watching.
Yeah. No, but I've been taking early forms of this. I had this epiphany back in probably 2002 where I can make nitric oxide, and I can go, and I did early experiments. I'd go to the gym, and I'd do pull-ups, and I'd take my nitric oxide. It was an early nasty tasting powder. Then I'd go back, and I could do probably 20 40% more pull-ups.
No way.
The same.
Immediately.
So immediately.
It's not dependent on like letting ATP regenerate or, really.
So I've been taking forms of my nitric oxide now for almost 20 years. And I take it not because I need it, because I don't want to need it, right? Because I want to make sure that my nitric oxide is optimized every day when I wake up and throughout the day. And so I'm very cognizant. I watch my diet. I do an 18-hour fast every day. I work out first thing when I wake up in the morning. I do 100 push-ups, 100 squats, high-intensity interval training. And I pop a lozenge. I take my beet powder in the morning, take my lozenge in the afternoon, and that gets me through the day.
All right, I'm going to ask you to revisit that because I did have a question specifically around, I have to know, we have to know, what is your nitric oxide optimization protocol?
It's a number of things. It's hard work.
So you personally here?
No, me personally, I'm as you, very regimented. So I try to get at least 6.5, 7 hours of sleep. My optimal sleep is 7 to 9 hours. And if I don't, look, nobody can perform if they're not getting good sleep.
I'm a new dad here. Don't even talk to me about sleep right now. Going through a 4-month regression. It's the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but my day starts out with an 18-hour fast. I eat my last meal at 6. I usually don't eat until noon the next day. But I wake up. I usually put on a pot of coffee. I take my what's called NO beets, put it in 2 ounces of water, take it as a shot. And then I do 25 push-ups, 25 squats. I do 4 sets.
Sorry, can we go back to the coffee and the beets thing? I'm curious. Is that because you take it with coffee? Is that because it works better?
No, it's just I like to have a cup of coffee in the morning. So
Okay.
I brew the cup of coffee.
I'm just trying to extract all the
coffee
secrets
later.
here.
So I take the beets so that immediately, as soon as it hits water solution, it generates nitric oxide gas.
Okay.
So I take that first thing in the morning and it just dilates my blood vessels, gets my blood going. And then that's when I do my early morning workout.
Okay.
I do 100 push-ups, 100 squats. I do it in usually less than 4 minutes.
Can I ask your age, sir?
51.
You guys got to watch the video. This guy does not look 51.
Well, I have the vascular age of a 36-year-old. We do functional measurements. But then once I finish my workout, I go sit in a sauna, 170 degrees for 30 minutes, an infrared sauna. So now but before I get in the sauna, I take binders like chlorella, spirulina, some types of activated charcoal. And then I'll usually a couple days a week, I'll do a cold plunge, 3 minutes at 37 degrees. And then when I'm home, about that time, the sun's coming up. So I'll go sit in my front yard naked looking at the sun for 15, 20 minutes.
The beautiful Texas sunrise.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then I eat a high protein, low carb lunch. And then I eat a dinner, mainly protein. I live on 800 acres. I grow my own food and raise my own beef. So 800.
That's incredible.
So we know what I'm putting in my body, and it's nothing like it.
There is nothing like. I grew up on almost 200 acres in Southwest Virginia, and we ate most of the food that we grew and just ran amok in the woods and played in the creek. And, I feel you on that. And the older I get now, I'll be 40 this year. I just keep wanting to go back to that. I'm looking for another 200-acre plot somewhere to just have a garden in the creek. It's incredible.
I mean, completely self-sufficient. We grow a garden. Certainly, we've got a garden now where we're harvesting them.
That's incredible. I want to go back and nitpick a little bit just because, you are a researcher, you're a biochemist. There's probably nothing you don't do, especially to this level, that has some kind of quantitative and qualitative reasoning. Let's go back to the sauna use, the cold plunge use. I heard you say frequency. I heard you say degrees for both. Can you walk us through why in both? Is there certain research that, shows otherwise, or just you kind of found this to be your sweet spot?
I think, everything I do is based on some, as you said, objective, quantifiable, and really what's published in the clinical data. The effects, the clinical benefits of contrast therapy, going from hot to cold, is pretty convincing. You turn on longevity genes, you turn, white adipose fat or visceral fat into brown fat. Which is more thermogenic, and you get more mitochondria. That's what makes them brown. And then you turn on all these longevity genes, and it's hormesis. But for me, I do the sauna for 2 reasons. Number one, I want to sweat. I live in Texas, so sweating is not a problem. But even in the winter, we still have to sweat. So 170 degrees in an infrared sauna, I completely, and it's detoxifying, right? We detoxify by breathing, by sweating, by pooping, and by peeing. And if we're not doing all of those on a consistent basis, we're building up toxins in our body. So I've been doing that for probably 10 or 15 years. Then several years ago, this cold plunge. And I hate cold water. I hate cold water. But when this started to become popular and I did it, it's awful for 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
But 10 minutes after I get out of that, I mean, it's like a feeling of energy and just, it's the best way to start my day.
I have one at home too. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. It's incredible.
But I hate it. I hate it every time I get in it.
There's this whole other component of like you're building mental resilience to this as well.
No, that's exactly right, because you have to mentally prepare yourself to get into an ice bath.
Yeah.
And you got to come into your breath. I think probably that's one of the benefits is you have to get into your breath.
Hopefully nasal breathing.
Nasal breathing, and you've got to convince yourself this is going to be awful for 3 minutes. But my philosophy is don't be a pea. Don't be a pea. Get in there and do it.
I heard, I forget where I heard this. It might have been like a Huberman clip or something. Actually, I have a buddy here who's a big cold plunge guy. He actually coaches people through this, like professional athletes and musicians. And he was sharing with me that the mechanism really of action here is the true benefits happen from cold water therapy, cold water exposure, when we don't want to do it. Something happens when when people flip that switch of I don't know, maybe they just are sadistic and they're like, I want to do this, and they actually really truly do.
I'm not there yet.
Yeah, there's not like the same downstream effects. Like it's not the same net positive effects of, I don't want to do it, but I'm gonna do it anyway. It's something about this like mental resilience aspect that then converts into the physical benefits. That's not as much when we actually want to enjoy it.
No, people are conditioned to want to take the easy route. They don't want to do things that are hard. And things that are worth doing are typically hard. And you gotta get your mindset right that, it's like JFK said, we're gonna go to the moon not because it's easy, because it's hard. And I think that's the mindset that people have to take, because taking the easy road is gonna lead you to a miserable life, poor health, poor outcomes. You gotta do things that are hard.
Well, you're in good company here. I'm gonna get actually to my final question with you, because I feel like this is a perfect segue. I could seriously just talk for another hour about this. Nitric oxide is at the root of everything. If you want to maximize health today, longevity tomorrow, and definitely, we didn't get into it a whole lot here today, but you have so many podcasts and pieces of content and research out about really showing how this, I think I've even heard you say, will cure Alzheimer's. So if you want to do better today, and be around for as long as possible, for a high quality of life as long as possible tomorrow. Focus on things that support nitric oxide efficiency and production.
For sure.
But I'll wrap all the science stuff there, and let's pick back up where you just left off about the mindset. Ever forward. The whole point of the show is to bring people on like yourself that embody this philosophy, this mantra that I learned from my father growing up. And through your lens of what you do, you've really shined a light as to how we can move forward in a unique area of our well-being today. But those two words, if I were to ask you, Dr. Bryan, what does it mean to you to live a life ever forward? What would you say?
I think it's a great transition, because we were just talking about that. It's doing the tough things. And, I'm convinced that what we've discovered through science is that these are fundamental truths of human physiology. And Schopenhauer, the German philosopher, said 400 years ago, all truths go through 3 phases. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. And then third, it's accepted as being self-evident. So for me, ever forward is seeing through those 3 stages. You gotta endure the ridicule. You gotta survive the violent opposition, because it's accepted as being self-evident. But if you're not ever forward, you'll never get to that 3rd stage where it's self-evident. So that's my mission, and that's what I'm here for.
There's never a right or a wrong answer. I appreciate everyone's interpretation. And I lied. I have one little piggyback, quick question. I was sharing with you earlier, the origin story. This came from my father, who passed away in 2005 from ALS. Have you come across anything in your research of nitric oxide supporting, preventing, reversing, or just seeing hope for anything related to ALS?
I mean, certainly nitric oxide can mitigate the inflammatory components of ALS or any autoimmune disease. But I think until we figure out what causes it, there's a root cause for everything. Just like there's a root cause for cancer, there's a root cause for ALS. And you've got to remove from the body the source of exposure that's causing that neuromuscular dysfunction, and then replete missing nutrients. Then the body heals itself. Nitric oxide can certainly support that and kind of mitigate the inflammation that occurs from that. But It would be supportive, not curative.
Well, it's good enough for me. It's definitely, I have a lot of habits in my life that support nitric oxide production and efficiency. And I've shared this with my audience before. A lot of what I do now in terms of content and my own personal wellness habits comes from fear. I mean, from being 19 years old and burying my father, who was my best friend, and just seeing this rough, tough mountain of a man, this big burly army guy, just wither away to nothing. Fear was my catalyst for making all these changes in my life. And it's incredible where fear can take you when you learn how to really utilize it the proper way, and not living in a state of fear, but living because of what a fearful life can do to you.
Absolutely. It's a great motivator.
Well, you're welcome back anytime. And oddly enough, I'm going to be in quite literally your backyard. I fly to Houston tomorrow. I'm going to visit my brother. He's having a baby shower. He lives out in Missouri City.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll wave when I'm flying over. But you're welcome back anytime,
Welcome to
Dr.
Texas.
Bryan. This was incredible.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you.
I every time we talk about nitric oxide, I don't realize how much I want to nerd out more about nitric oxide. It's in everything, and just because of and can influence so many things. It's crazy. Please don't stop the work that you do. It's been incredible just keep watching.
We're just getting started. We got a lot of work to do.
Amazing.